Okay, we are now recording. Wanted to let you know that, as usual, we do have the summary cards here. We also have one on the coronavirus summary card that, as you can imagine, gets updated daily. So here it is here before you. It is in the summary card folder for you, as well as direct links to the agenda that is placed in the Google folder. So here we have, thanks to the Ed Services Division of the IU, we have resources that have been out and resources also that you can avail yourselves of and things to do. And we'll talk more about this resource here, the Learn On, which the address is learnon.iu12.org. As you're thinking about moving to some type of online instruction, this is a huge resource that you can avail yourselves of for your leaders and for your teachers and for parents. So I share that with you, and we'll talk about the Learn On a little bit later, but I wanted you to know that you have that resource available to you in the summary cards. So at this point, I'm going to turn my screen over to Bill Zee from Barley Snyder to provide for us on the topic of COVID-19 special education and health emergencies. So Bill, I'm going to stop share, and you should be able to click on share your screen.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Bear with me 1 second here. All right, is that PowerPoint showing up for everyone?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right, beautiful. So good morning, everyone. Although I already provided my typical caveat, I will repeat it again for those of you who just joined. Obviously, I represent the IU. I represent some of the other individuals that are in our virtual meeting here. But certainly anything that you have additional questions on, or if there's anything that doesn't exactly align with advice that you're receiving from your counsel, you should run that through. Reasonable minds can differ, particularly under these circumstances now. And what we're going to provide to you today is, you know, we've had a team effort, all hands on deck with this, and kind of where we are with things. I have Dave Walker also on the line, who may jump in from time to time, and also Kalani Linnell. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things I really want to make sure that we do this morning is this is your time. So if there are questions, I'm not wedded to going through these slides. Some of this is information that may be included in the summary card that Lynn just went through, or things that have been forwarded to you separately. But we felt the need to sort of walk through this as well, just in case there are questions. So feel free to let me know if you have questions or you want me to expand on anything. My other comment there will be, anybody who tells you they have all the answers right now on this information is not being truthful with you. So some of this we are certainly trying to work through still on our own, and it'll continue to evolve. And it was as of, you know, the wee hours of last night and early this morning. So what I'd like to walk through is where we stand right now, a summary of some of the most recent and applicable guidelines for you. Unfortunately, some of the guidelines, particularly at the federal level that we've had, haven't been particularly helpful. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Some of the procedural considerations, I'm getting a lot of questions on that. What do our documents look like as far as our notice documents and our NORAPs? So I have a view on that. I have drafted. I know there's others that are circulating around. I'm happy once, you know, Lynn and I get to the point where we're in agreement on that, we're happy to share that as well. But again, people have differing opinions on what that should include. Next, some of the substantive considerations. Obviously, those of you who are moving toward providing more in the way of continuity of instruction than just enrichment activities or something less than what you normally provide regular ed. We'll have to start to think about substantively what FAPE is, what that looks like in an online format or some other alternate format that you choose. We'll go through some additional considerations, and then at the end of the PowerPoint, which you all have access to, we have a number of resources that we have been referring to with that. We'll kind of move through. As you know, as of yesterday, schools are closed for an additional 2 weeks. There was some confusion around that once it was first put out there, that actually means we're looking another week out from where we started, with a possible reopening on the 7th and a student return on the 9th as we sit here right now. Again, that is all subject to change, but that's kind of what we're looking at. So that at least gives some guidance as far as what you should be doing on the planning front. Continuity of education plans. I know that there's been some communication that technical assistance can be provided by the IU. I'm sure Lynn's going to address that in the next portion of what we're doing and what services provide there. Understanding, again, that different districts are at a different place with some of this right now as well. As you're also probably aware, all of our standardized testing has been canceled at this point. There was some additional confusion as to whether this included NOCTI and some other testing, but that was all addressed as well yesterday. So we're not dealing with a standardized testing issue. Stay-at-home orders for 6 counties. I did look this morning. I didn't see the expansion of that as of this morning, but again, that could have changed in the time that I've been preparing for this. Right now, that's for the next 2 weeks. Even without a stay-at-home order, the advice has been and continues to be for individuals to stay at home. This, of course, has created confusion with respect to board meetings and some of the life essential functions that you are providing in your districts as well. So I'm sure you're getting some advice from your legal counsel on that. Board meetings are through Zoom are really interesting, particularly with public involvement. So that'll be really interesting for everyone. Secretary Rivera yesterday clarified that essential personnel does include and is permitted to include the meals and food preparation and things that you're doing for students outside of providing educational instruction as well. And you can see on your slide there some of the other areas that have been included there. Even in the business world, there's confusion around this and what this includes and does not include. I would say talk with your solicitor if there's any question about that and who can be in your building providing any sort of services at this point. Really right now, both at the federal and state level, I think the focus has been on prevention and mitigation. As of yesterday afternoon at the federal level, at least, there's been some suggestion that might shift a little bit with respect to allowing some business to carry on. But right now where we sit, it's prevention and mitigation, really getting into the testing, who should be tested, how expansive that should be. And really the biggest focus, I think, has been continuously making sure that our health system is not overcome in this crisis and that they're ready to the extent they can be for the potential surge. So some recent updates, again, some of these more helpful than others. On the 21st, you're probably familiar with the Department of Ed's supplemental fact sheet. I found this to probably be one of the most frustrating documents that's been put out because it essentially reiterates a lot of what we already know and I think really provided or created more confusion than anything else and really ran counter to what it was intended to do. So hopefully we'll get some additional guidance there. I know there's been some speculation as to when the education secretary at the federal level will actually give us some more definitive guidance or be involved in some of these daily press conferences that we're seeing. That has not happened yet. March 20th, PD applied for ESSA accountability waiver. That's occurring. I had a conference call yesterday morning with school law attorneys from around the country. Those sort of things are occurring all over the place. So that not surprising there. The thought is that there will be some additional waivers with respect to obligations under federal law as well, although it would be completely speculative at this point to say what those might be. March 19th, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That really includes a lot of information with respect to how this is going to play out on the employment and labor side of things. There's a very good COSA summary, Council of School Attorneys, that we've included the link to. So if you're not familiar with that, you may want to take a look. And then on March 12th, the FERPA fact sheet and virtual delivery guidance, again, kind of reiterating a lot of things that we already knew, but worth taking a look at as well. So continuity of education per the Department of Education supplemental sheet. Again, I found this guidance to be a little frustrating. It emphasizes the fact that flexibility there is flexibility, but that flexibility is within those confines of the law. So I think that's something we all knew. We understand that we can provide special education instruction through different means. I think the real question becomes, how are we defining FAPE in our new normal? And, what are the expectations going to be on the back end with respect to compensatory education, particularly when we know that resources will be strained when we do, in fact, return to in-person instruction. So some of the highlights there, really what we're doing is make faith educations, and it says online, but I think really that's, given some of the equity issues here as well, it goes beyond just online. I know some in the conference call I had yesterday morning, and I believe the school district of Lancaster has also communicated this out to their population, that that good faith effort is really starting with the most immediate needs. So what do we need to do to educate those soon to be graduating seniors? What do we need to be doing for our special ed population? And what do we need to be doing as far as getting people connected if we're going to do things online? So that planning's sort of in place. That's been discussed in some other states as well, and how they're going about doing that, particularly the online piece. It was shared with me yesterday that there are states that are using buses to go out and be mobile hotspots. Some are sending, in addition to providing laptops to students, pucks for Wi-Fi connection as well. So a lot of different things being done on that front, making sure, again, that whatever we're providing is offering a meaningful educational opportunity for students. So the new FAPE, again, this is still evolving, but again, from the guidance, consistent with the need to protect the health and safety of students with disabilities and staff who work with them. And that's why I think some of the language that we are including in these procedural documents that are required is going to be really important, and making sure these may be a little more wordy, at least that's the position I'm taking, than what we normally do. But I think it's really important to emphasize some of these really critical points in that communication with parents. Again, where we are now, the guidance definitely does. I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay. The guidance does reference compensatory education determinations upon return. I think really the hope is, once we start to move to instruction, that we can minimize that to the greatest extent possible. I know, and I'm sure some of you have seen, that some of the parent bar firms have been sending out notices to their clients and really putting things out there that, what their expectations are with respect to FAPE, and the understanding that if that's not being provided, they're really going to be looking for comp ed. So I think that at this point, again, making some of those good faith efforts to provide some level of service will prove very helpful in the back end. It's just a matter of making sure that we do that in a way that we don't put ourselves in a worse position than we are currently. So FERPA guidance regarding virtual delivery of instruction. We had some questions on this, and if Kalani is able to, I'm going to let her weigh in a little bit, because she did a nice job doing some research, putting together a nice memo on this yesterday. So can you weigh in, Kalani?
Yes. Am I off mute now? I hope.
I can hear you.
Okay. So if we go back a slide, there's HIPAA guidance on the privacy issues when delivering through telehealth. And we know that the HIPAA and FERPA standards kind of get conflated, especially in the school setting. But I think that if it matches the HIPAA security requirements, it will fit under the FERPA privacy requirements. So I think I linked to it later in this presentation, the HIPAA requirements for telehealth. And if not, I can send that to Lynn to put on the summary card. But the HIPAA requirements have listed certain platforms which are not going to meet privacy guidelines, and then certain online platforms which are, even if under usual circumstances, they wouldn't. So for example, Facebook chat is going to meet FERPA's or HIPAA's privacy guidelines right now, even though that third-party platform typically would not meet their security guidelines. So there's a couple platforms that are listed there, and I encourage, if you are providing services That way, if you're not using Zoom, if that's not possible, to look at the other platforms on that guidance.
Thanks, Kalani. So procedural considerations, I know there's been a lot of questions around timelines. Again, we don't have very clear guidance other than, right now where we stand, timelines are still in effect. I understand that's not particularly helpful. We've worked with some clients on putting together prior written notice to address a number of situations with respect to evaluations and timelines. But again, some of that's just based on clear guidance. We are trying to make sure that we are effectively communicating at least what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think that's the most that we can do at this point. ODR and the hearing officers issued a joint statement. Again, there has not been waivers of timelines with respect to the procedural safeguards, mediation, resolution sessions, due process. However, built into the law as it currently is written, there is the ability for parties to work together to extend some of those timelines. I know in the conversations I've had, and I can only speak for myself in dealing with some parent-side attorneys, people have been very reasonable thus far in trying to work around timelines and come to some agreement on, when we're going to revisit things based on where we are right now and how things evolve. I mentioned prior written notice already. Again, I know there's been some examples of this that have been floated around. I have my take on that as well. It looks a little different than some of those, and that's in no way meant to be critical. I think, again, reasonable minds can differ. And I think we're all just trying to, we're guessing at some of this, but trying to put you in the best position that we think you can be in as we move forward in this. So some of the substantive considerations, I actually saw something interesting from the Council of Exceptional Children this morning. So if any of you are linked there, and I'll send it to Lynn as well. It's just a chart, some things you should be thinking about. Recommend to teachers, case managers, consistent methods of differentiation and service delivery when certain challenges are present. So again, this is going to require drawing on those who have knowledge of the student that you're trying to adapt some of these services for in the short term during closures. We don't normally recommend categorical approaches, but under these abnormal circumstances, we were talking a little bit as a team yesterday. I think it makes a lot of sense, particularly with groups like this you have access to. And I know that my colleagues in other states are doing this as well. If you have good ideas and ways that you think you can approach this, it could be helpful. I think this is a time where, we draw on the natural tendency of educators to want to help and share. So that doesn't mean we're going to have cookie cutter IEPs for everyone. I think what it means is that, if people are doing things that are effective given these circumstances, if we can draw on some of that and adapt it for a particular student, rather than trying to create, there's going to be a monumental amount of work with all of this, and to the extent we can lean on each other, I think that's helpful as well. Just in generalities, here are some examples of things that we're thinking or how we're wording certain items in an IEP, an interim IEP, or an amended IEP. You all, as we know from having this meeting monthly, bring things to this situation based on your experience that are invaluable. So I think it's important to share that. But we still need to be focused on making individual determinations. So it's important to have case managers flag those IEPs that are going to be the most difficult to address under these current circumstances. That would be my priority of where we're expending energy, at least in these initially, leading up perhaps some shift in what the continuity of instruction means. If to the extent you can, arrange for a telephonic or video conference meeting with as many team members as possible to create that temporary plan that provides still that meaningful educational opportunity. This is all really driven by what's in that supplemental fact sheet, which again is what we already know the law requires. And when we're amending IEPs, the caution here is the contents of the IEP and what that definition of FAPE is. And again, some of that will be driven as well by what you're putting in that prior written notice, and that NORA, where I know there are some different versions of that floating around. But I think it's really important to focus in on that. The position I've taken on that is this is not normal. Even if we move to online for general ed students, it's not going to be normal for anyone. So starting from that premise and understanding that what we need to really be doing is making a good faith, our best effort to provide access to whatever that new normal is for all students. I think you need to make reference of that in your communication parents as well, so that when we're dealing with this on the back end, we have that to sort of rely on as well.
Bill,
The other thing is, I think go ahead.
May I pause you a moment? There's been a question in the chat. Are you suggesting that NORUPs be provided to all students in special education in regards to the temporary changes due to COVID-19?
I think that once we start providing some level of instruction, and if we're moving beyond, and the good term I heard was advancing the board curriculum. Once we're doing that for students, I think we're going to have to. Now, I think those are going to look significantly different than what they normally look like, and they may look similar for students as far as what's in the NORUP and the PW. Then they're going to look like, I think, have to be individually driven. You know, how you prioritize that, again, I referenced what's going on in some other states, looking at, you know, those close to graduation, seniors, looking at those students with really significant needs and kind of focusing there first. I understand that, you know, we're talking about a huge amount of work for special educators. And, you know, I had this conversation with a board last night about the level of work that's going to be involved with this. But where we are now, absent some additional guidance that suggests there are going to be waivers or actually, you know, solidifies that position, I think if you're going to move in that direction and provide instruction, then yes, I do think you need to do that. So one of the things I wanted to reference was, you know, the Andrew F. case and this language that was inserted, which at the time didn't really seem to make a whole lot of difference in some people's minds. I think actually has some utility now when we talk about progress in light of the child's circumstances. Clearly the circumstances for everyone now is that they're homebound and they're receiving their education in a different way. And I think we want to make reference to that and have that factor into how we're going about providing these services as well, because I think that could potentially prove useful. Progress is going to look different for all students right now as well, but I think one of the critical components is once you move in this direction, making sure that we are documenting what we're providing and how students are progressing to the extent we can. I understand, again, progress monitoring is going to look different, but it's going to be important if we stay the way we are right now, and the assumption is we're going to address a lot of this on the back end through compensatory ed, we're going to have a way to be able to articulate our position on what that requires and what that entails. And I think what we do in documenting services now and what we're providing and what that looks like and how students are progressing or responding to that is going to be really important. Another important point here, provide teachers with resources and links and a pathway for requesting assistance in planning and delivery. Again, I'll reference some of the information that's been put out by the Council of Exceptional Children, which I have actually found to be particularly helpful here, definitely more so than some of what we're getting out of the government at this point. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that website, or if you don't have a membership, maybe looking into that as well. I think it's useful at this point. And no, I don't work in any way for the Council for Exceptional Children. I just have been impressed with some of what I've seen in the chat rooms there, and also some of the resources they've made available. Continuity of education plans, and you know, that's the million-dollar question: is what does continuity of education mean? How do we define that? And I don't think that's particularly clear right now. But I think some just general recommendations is not to overinflate or embellish the level of education that's going to be provided to all students through remote education, again, whether that be online or in some alternative means. And transitioning to that sort of education, and I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, with this short of notice is going to cause you know, difficulty for students, and you're certainly going to be in a situation where you're providing somewhat less than what is provided in a traditional classroom setting. But that's true not only for special education students. I think that's going to be true for everyone, at least those who weren't receiving their instruction through those alternative means prior to the current circumstances. The other issue is, you know, what is your goal for that continuity plan? I had a discussion again yesterday with some of my colleagues around the country, and some of them are looking at making differentiating between lower grades and older students with respect to what that continuity plan looks like. With, you know, and the rationale there is, you know, some students have more limited time with respect to being able to receive education before they're out into the world. whereas some of the younger students are going to be with us a little longer. So maybe we can kind of prioritize and focus on those students, they're nearing graduation. Again, that's something I saw as well this morning with School District of Lancaster, where we are in Lancaster County, is one of the focus areas that they have as well. So I already talked a lot about this whole idea of parental consent, the NORUP and the PWN, and the modification of those forms. I'm not going to get heavy in the weeds in this because I know most of your councils probably are already circulating thoughts on this and what that needs to look like. Again, I have my own thoughts. I'm happy to share those one-on-one with people. I'll certainly share them with Lynn, and to the extent she feels it's useful, she can share it with others as well. But where we are right now, again, it's important to look in that communication and making sure that it does not put us in any worse position than we could be in had we done nothing at all. So some other considerations, if you're determining from the outset that you're not providing any sort of remote special education and related services and look just to comp ed, I think that's probably a mistake. At least that's my opinion. That would not be my recommendation. I think, my understanding is that most districts are looking and planning right now to move in that direction. We also have some really significant concerns about disability-based discrimination under Section 504 and intentional discrimination. I think that we want to recognize that there is going to need to be an analysis with respect to comp ed at the back end and really focus our attention on what we can do now to minimize that and make sure that we're doing the best we can for kids. So probably more so than ever, this idea of collaborating with families and ensuring those strong relationships is critical. Making sure that those families recognize the hard work that you're doing. That's something that's come up repetitively in communications I've had with clients, that relationship piece, making sure that case managers understand that, and really everyone. And the families know that you're making every reasonable effort, given the circumstances, to make sure that students get what they need. So looking ahead, some of the labor-related issues, and Dave, if you're on the line, I'm going to let you jump in as well on this with respect to some of the expansion of FMLA under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and some of the other federal legislation that's going to impact staffing and personnel-related issues.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. Thank you very much. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your patience. I'm socially distancing myself from a toddler at the moment, so you can all hear me. But we wanted to take a minute just to touch base on a few of these issues that are coming out. And I'll start at the state level, just so you're aware of it. There's potential legislation that's going to be pushed through that PSBA circulated an email on yesterday that may actually tie our hands in multiple ways for the legislation that's proposed on the federal level and that's passed on the federal level. What I'm talking about specifically is there's legislation on the state level that's going to hopefully address possibly the PSERS funding issue and the PSERS year of service credit issue, but also put in place that employees, both hourly and salaried employees, essentially will be paid for the contract year that you have budgeted currently. So that's one of these areas that Bill noted is kind of a stay tuned, because things are changing by the minute and by the moment. So look out for that. Beyond that, though, everyone is aware that there was the federal enactment of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And that had two provisions in there. And I won't go into huge depth with these as far as all the details, but it definitely included an expansion of Emergency Family Medical and Leave Act, and it also included emergency paid sick leave. These provisions do apply to the school setting, and they will apply to your employees. There is obviously the issue that if we're currently in a closure and these people are, especially our hourly employees, are not currently working, so we don't have work available for them, so then we have to ask whether and to what extent they'd qualify for leave since they're currently not able to work. But either way, these are out there, and these are things that are going to be with us as we move forward once instruction resumes. And once we resume instruction, even in a remote setting for our professional staff, we may have a large number of our professional staff using especially the expansion of the Family Medical Leave Act, because for any of these individuals whose children are home, or they have a reason that qualifies, it could cause some staffing difficulties on our end. So I won't go into the details much further than that, just to say that these are out there, and as you're moving forward with any continuity of instruction type plans, I strongly recommend that you consult with your labor counsel on these issues and work closely with your special education staff to see what may need to change, so that's calculated into your ongoing education plan.
Thanks, Dave. One of the other things we have referenced here, I raise it because it's creating a lot of, it's getting a lot of traction on some of the social media outlets. This idea of proposed federal legislation allowing for waiver of additional of civil rights protections. That does not right now, it hasn't specifically stated anything with respect to IDEA or 504, but there's been some advocacy groups that are starting petitions to prevent that. It remains to be seen what, if anything, is going to be done on that front. I think the intent here, at least from what I understand for some of the initial information that was coming out, this really wasn't directed as much as special education protections and some other potential civil rights implications of some of the things that the government may feel compelled to do if this virus continues to spread. But right now, I bring that to your attention only because it's definitely coming up a lot in some of the advocacy chat groups and some of the social media postings with respect to what IDEA and 504 protections will look like if there are additional changes at the federal government level here and we move to instruction. In fact, one of the Forbes articles yesterday, which you can easily find online, talks about, are we essentially just leaving special education students behind? I don't think there's any real risk of that. Certainly not in our state, and what I'm hearing, what our state is attempting to do on this front. But that is out there, and we don't know what other legislation will be proposed or what will ultimately get passed. One of the things we haven't talked a lot about, and Dave kind of touched on this a little bit, is in this continuity of education planning, you do need to think about what's going to happen and what sort of redundancies in place if you have teachers or students become sick. I mean, we're right now assuming that we're all healthy and we're going to be providing these services to healthy kids, but there's some special ed implications, obviously, if we have students who contract the virus, and certainly there are going to need to be some planning adjustments made if we have teachers who, God forbid, end up in that situation as well. So something, again, to think about. So some of the things I would suggest you want to take a look at daily, that at least we're trying to do, or perhaps your council is doing this, getting you information, but U.S. Department of Education has that dedicated COVID-19 page where, they put sometimes not helpful information about what you should be doing. PDE actually has a dedicated page as well. That was updated as recently as late yesterday. So definitely check in with that and the FAQ page there as well. Secretary Rivera's daily messages, all of these are linked here so you can find them. If you are subscribed to Special Ed Connection through LRP, that's something worth taking a look at as well. They're daily. There hasn't been as much on COVID-19 until this morning. I noticed a number of the articles were more driven by responses to the virus now as well. But it's worth taking a look. There's useful information there as well. I mentioned several times the Council for Exceptional Children, so there's that link. And then PSBA also has a dedicated COVID-19 page. A lot of that has been focused on some of the labor related implications and some of the board requirements with respect to moving to online meetings, but there are occasionally there's some information that's posted regarding special education as well as it becomes available. So that's where we are. I imagine there would be a number of questions. I will certainly attempt to answer those, and I know Kalani is going to take down questions, comments, and thoughts as well, so that to the extent we can't provide an answer, and if we're still, hopefully this isn't the case, but if we're still in this situation, the next time we convene electronically, we can weigh in on some of those as well. So with that, I'll open it up.
Also, if you wanted to use the chat feature, you can send me a question privately and I'll read it out loud without saying your name if that's I don't know if people are nervous about asking questions, but nothing's obvious, I don't think, at this point for anybody, so.
I'm nervous about answering questions. Everybody has all the answers, so you guys tell me what you're doing then.
Well, what we can do is move along in the agenda a bit and then continue to pause for questions. And Bill, if you and Kalani and Dave, or at least one of you, could stay on board to answer such.
Oh, absolutely.
That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question before we move on?
Go for it.
So our concern, obviously, in our department is mental health. Bill, Kalani, and Dave. So we have a lot of questions about doing this remotely. I know that some of the federal legislations have been kind of softened a little bit and that sort of thing. What we're telling our staff to do is to try to use Zoom for all that, to know that, and then before they start every conversation with a parent or with a student, to express to them that there's no guarantee of confidentiality. You know, my husband and my kids are here and they could run through the room, and you know, you're living there with your family too. So just to kind of start every conversation with just kind of the discussion that confidentiality is not guaranteed. Would you suggest anything more, anything less, anything different? We're looking for any answers, I guess.
Go ahead, Kalani.
The Pennsylvania Social Workers Association has they're calling it informed consent form, and it hits like a couple of the things you just mentioned, like, you know, my family might run through, we're not completely private. The other thing to disclose would be that whatever platform you're using could be collecting data, things like that. But that form kind of hits those things. I think that that's a really good disclaimer to give at the outset. The National Association for School Psychologists also has guidance, and they have a whole packet from a few years ago, actually. So it's not COVID specific, but it's about best practices in telehealth when you're delivering mental health services through telehealth. So that would be something that I think that everyone should probably get a refresher on, even if they saw it a few years ago and it wasn't that applicable. That would be something to distribute to your school psychologists or people who are giving behavioral and mental health services over an online platform.
Can I ask a follow-up question then, Kalani? Since we're not doing traditional telehealth, you know, there's not a mental health professional on the other end of the line, should we be calling it something different than telehealth? Are we just kind of opening ourselves up to a liability if we're calling it telehealth and it's not truly telehealth, or no?
I've been calling it virtual service delivery, but I think that the way that we're going to find guidance or any guidance that's been expounded up until this point is usually in the telehealth field, or even in cyber school kind of fields. And so even though those are outside of where we would usually look for resources, I think that that's where we're going to have to look for analogous resources. The other thing, and the Council for Exceptional Children has a form for this that they've created, but it can be adapted, I would say, and should be adapted for everyone, is service delivery logs for during this time. And they might need to look different than what you are usually doing, but making sure that even if there's a checklist on there of, you know, notified the family prior to our online meeting that this was not private, check, did that. How long did you spend on activities, check, did that. Were there any connectivity issues at the time, anything like that, and summarizing and keeping a log that way, so that we can have documentation of exactly what was provided when it was provided.
Great, thank you. So just one more follow-up question. When you have a student or a parent that you're working with who is expressing some type of suicidal ideation or plan, that sort of thing, intent, our thought was just to call police and have them do a well check, but I don't know if you have any other advice along those lines.
I haven't looked into what's still available, so I don't have advice on that. I would assume that crisis care lines are still available and that they would direct.
Yeah, I think when in doubt, though, Laura, that's the response that I would recommend, because we know that's a functioning service, and if we have concerns, I'd rather err on the side of making that report and getting someone help as quickly as possible. To go back to your earlier point, though, Kalani addressed this, but I do want to emphasize this. Language is really important right now in what we call things, so I would agree with you. We don't want to be calling things, giving things labels that don't accurately reflect what they are. So I don't think we should be calling it telehealth. I think the point here is that if you're looking for resources, that's the nomenclature you're going to have to find the resources, but I don't think that's necessarily what we want to be identifying those services as. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Great. Thank you. And we'll just pick up on Kalani's language there and not call it telehealth. I'm more comfortable that way also, too. Thank you.
Hey, Bill, there are questions in the chat. I don't know if you have your chat open.
I don't, but if you want to just have at it and read them, we can do it that way.
Sure. The first one is, if we go to online learning, should we contact families of 504s and gifted students in addition to our special ed families?
My answer would be yes. I think that we have FAPE obligations, and as we all know, there are FAPE obligations to Section 504 students as well. So I think that we need to make sure that parents understand that we're going to be providing access in a way that's non-discriminatory. So I think that goes back to the statement earlier that when we're thinking IDEA, we also have to be thinking about that all those students are protected under Section 504 against discrimination. So I absolutely think it's going to be necessary to communicate with all of the families that you provide services for.
And there's another question. There's a couple others coming in. Do you recommend adding, and then in quotes, and or virtual learning to locations within SDI for areas applicable?
I've taken a bit of a more expansive, if you're locked in that that's what you're going to do, then yes, the level of specificity there is fine. And that's one of the areas that the verbiage that I have in the NORA PWN is a little different. It's more expansive, so it's just alternative methods of instruction. So it's not limited just to online, because I have concerns there again with some of the equity issues, and also if we have some sort of technical glitches and we can't do this stuff online, do we have enough flexibility that we can provide it in other ways as well? But yes, I think if you're going to identify what that instruction looks like, you have to, you can do it broadly, but I think you have to spell out what alternative instruction might encompass.
And then how are we addressing FAPE specifically for students identified as gifted, not twice exceptional? And also twice exceptional. So when it's a gifted student, is the calculus changing at all for what we're talking about when we're talking about FAPE under these circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, some of this you're going to have to look specifically at what students receive. I know that even in this time of continuity instruction where many are focusing on enrichment, I've seen gifted coordinators reaching out with resources for kids. I think that we can provide enrichment. In some ways, it might be, I hate to use the word easier, but it may lend itself a little better to including some of that as well. I don't think in any circumstance we're talking about exactly what would happen if we were in an face-to-face, instructional setting. But, I think if we're going to start providing services to kids and some kids have additional needs, we need to be thinking about how we're going to meet those needs in that altered setting.
And should we be using the NORA for the gifted to do online instead of the NORA?
So I'm assuming, yeah, we're talking just for solely gifted students. I haven't thought a lot about that. I think that we are so familiar with these forms and we use them, and that's what parents are familiar with, that it's helpful to stick to the form even if we need to modify some things. So I'd probably be inclined to do it the same way. But I'd probably want to think about that one a little bit more as well. I haven't focused a lot on gifted, honestly, at this point. I've been pretty much focused on special education.
Well, I think that I'll go back to something that Bill said earlier in the presentation about FAPE and the Andrew F. language in progress in light of a child's circumstances, and how that includes all of the circumstances in society right now. And what we're looking at it for FAPE generally is just not the same. Even so, I think then if you translate that to what it looks like for gifted, same thing. The gifted students might not be getting the enrichment that they were getting prior to this. A question about language in so this is under the assumption that you're amending an IEP to reflect remote learning. If we use and/or virtual learning in SDI, would that impact language used in other areas of the IEP, like in the transition portion? How much of the IEP is going to be amended, and would you have to be kind of wedded to what you're promising at that point?
Sorry, phone's ringing. Yeah, I think it's going to impact other aspects of the IEP as well. How wedded you're going to be to what you're promising is a difficult question to answer. I think that we want to make it clear again in those communication documents that this is going to look very different than what it would look like in person, and acknowledge that at the front end. And I think you need to prioritize some things. So in my view, things like transition services are going to be much more important for some students, even though we start to think about it and embed that for all students at a particular age. It's going to be much more important for some students than others. So I think we're going to have to focus in particular areas until we get a little more guidance as to what really is going to be essential in offering education and providing access that's at least equal to what we're providing to everyone else, and trying to make sure we level that playing field.
Another question is there any discussion about cyber schools reopening if districts go to online learning?
Haven't heard anything directly, but it really irritated me this morning as I was sitting down here working early, and all I heard repeatedly in the commercials were cyber school commercials. So they're clearly, the marketing department's taking advantage of that opportunity. So I haven't heard anything on that front, but I haven't been particularly focused on it either. So.
Okay, that I think that answers the questions that are in the chat for right now, so we could move on for right now if Lynn wanted to.
All right, Lynn, and I think I'm right on time, or we're right on time actually. So I love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. So we have Stacy Mears with us. So I'm going to turn this over to Stacy. She has updates from the state. So Stacy, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and tell us what you have to tell us. Thank you.
Hi. Basically, I could actually speak about the cyber school guidance. Since all the schools in Pennsylvania closed, they all followed the governor's directive to close during the same time period. So once there is some sort of continuity of education, most likely they will be reopening along with that. As of right now, there is a continuity of education plan. There's 3 options that schools will be provided, which include a planned instruction where you can actually provide new skills, the enrichment and review, which is your maintenance of skills, or no instruction. So they're the three options at this point. On the patent website, there is, patent actually has a link on the website to support families when it comes to COVID-19 guidance. Whatever you as an LEA choose to do, just make sure that everything is documented, and services and communication to families is all documented. The one key thing that we're stressing is that you're using the NORUP to document the fact that you are offering services to the parents and families, and if they refuse them, you have some sort of documentation. The key thing is to just work with those with the families. The special education plans, there's 5 of you that have special education plans due this year. When to that aspect, and even when it comes to a separate, if you have like the floor plans or the classroom or layout or something, we're going to be reviewing them that way. The complaint process is going to be more so online as it was, because in the past. So if there is a complaint, it's going to be online. When it comes to the patent website, you could search by initiative. So there should be under one of the initiatives for COVID-19 supports on there. One of the other PDE work groups is looking on graduation. So at this point, it's most likely going to be a local decision on graduation, and then they're still working on something when it comes to those students who reach the age of 21. Those students who actually took the PASA, they're looking at some guidance as possibly pushing back those scores to you. Mentioned the special education plans. If you guys are done with your special education plans, send me an email, let me know, I'll review it and get any information back to you. When FAPE is decided, when it comes to new instruction, just make sure everything is documented. And just make sure you're putting in a good faith effort, so you can actually show that you are working with the parents and families. And then when it comes to the special education monitorings, I believe at this point there's 4 left in the region. They're working on creating an alternate monitoring schedule, so that's in the process of being created. And then the timelines. The timelines at this point, as you know, aren't changing. But when it comes to the initial evaluations on the timelines, obviously there is new testing that would occur. If you're able to do it virtually or even meet to get it done, that's fine. But when it comes to Table 8A, timely evaluations, the Bureau will be working with you to get you back into compliance when it comes to timelines, if any of that, if you fall out of place on the timelines. So that's pretty much everything that I know. Obviously, with your 504s and gifted, that was also brought up too this morning. Just make sure you're working with those parents to ensure FAPE. So that's all I got.
Stacy, thank you. This is Lynn. And just for everyone to know that I do have the definitions of those common language terms that Stacy referred to in the agenda of continuity of education, planned instruction, and enrichment and review, which was provided by Matt Stem at a PAU meeting yesterday. So you have that. The other thing that wanted to reiterate that I did hear from Carol Clancy yesterday regarding the IDEA guidelines is exactly what Stacy said, but Carol had offered that although they can't change the timelines, what they can do, and like Stacy said, be supportive in their response to you for missed timelines. And Carol did say that they were going to work with districts during this time. Stacy, there was a question in the chat. How do we obtain signatures on the NORAPs?
Okay. You can obtain signatures on the NORAPs. They can be done electronically. If you have, but you also have to follow your district's plan when it comes to electronic signatures. So there should be guidance on from your own district on the electronic signatures, but you can obtain them electronically with a virtual sign, but there should be more guidance on that from your own district when it comes to signing documents electronically.
Next question is, wouldn't virtual evaluations compromise the assessment environment, such as other people in the room, etc.?
Was on at this point, you don't necessarily, if you have a lot of the documents already done, you don't necessarily need to actually meet. At this point, you can always postpone that until you're actually back. And I know that would actually go against the timeline, but if you wouldn't have, that would be your best option. Or if there is a way you can even meet somewhere that is, with less than, a place that has less than 10 people, you can even do that. But at this point, we highly suggest it not, unless it's like a dire need. The next question, we do not have if you don't electronic signature guidance, you can, if there's no policy regarding that your district doesn't have anything about electronic signature guidance, I would create a policy and go from there, saying that you're able to accept it, an electronic signature. And you can use that and work on creating some sort of guidance, some sort of document that way.
I would suggest reaching out to your council on that through your superintendent or your executive director as well. There are components that you would want to make sure that you have in that policy before you start enacting that as well. So that's an area that I think people could seek some help from their council on as well.
Yeah, thank you. And then the next question I see is, can we accept a verbal agreement for NORAPs since it is a good faith plan? I would document it, that saying, yes, there is a verbal agreement stated on this date. And then later on, I would even send something out, send it out to them. If you can't, if you're say you're having a meeting, meeting on the phone about it, just make sure it's documented. And the parent actually verbally says yes. So any form of it being documented would be fine. Any other questions?
Okay, Stacy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next up on the agenda, before I go and give you some more of the LIU updates, I want to draw your attention to the resources under number 3, the learnon.iu12.org. We do have Ben Smith and Jared Mader joining us today, and I'm going to turn this over to both of them to share with you the online resource that is available to you. And this is much like, in content-wise, the what the PAIU had pulled together for IUs to help districts moving to online instruction. We just happened to, thanks to the expertise of our Educational Technology Division, we're able to put it into a meaningful platform so you can access it in a meaningful way, as opposed to like a 70-page document. So Jared, it's all yours. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lynn, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. We will be recording this meeting. I see that Lynn is recording it. We also have about 4 other existing recordings of going through this exact overview, many of which Some of you may have actually been a part of teams who have joined us on. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jared. I'm our Director of Educational Technology. Ben Smith and Nicole Bond are both on as well. If you can find them in the Brady Bunch windows. Ben is our supervisor of educational technology, and Nicole is one of our specialists for educational technology, or is our specialist. I say is our educational technology specialist. We started working on this as an outcropping of a meeting that actually, it feels like it was months ago, but it was just last Sunday. 2 Sundays ago, we met with superintendents early in the afternoon. And one of the areas that I heard loud and clear from the superintendents at that time was a need for an actionable plan to be able to move to online learning. And what we, as a team, as we quickly mobilized, it's important to note that this site didn't actually exist that day. This site actually was born on Monday, 2 Mondays ago. I guess it would have been like, I don't know, the 16th or so of March. And it has developed to what is probably hundreds of pages at this point, site loads, I should say, as well as has had thousands of individuals that have now accessed it. So we feel that we are on the right path. When Lynn has referenced the PAIU resource portal or resource document, we went and preemptively actually went between our division, educational services, and special education, even in fact HR as well, looking at some of the human elements of this, the teacher elements, the collective bargaining elements that are connected to moving to online learning. We really tried as a team to build this resource for you that is very centered around leadership and very pragmatic steps to follow. And so knowing the audience in this room, we definitely want to point out the things that we've provided in the area of FAPE, and we'll talk about that when we get to that. The site we made is very easy to get to. It's just learnon.iu12.org. And yes, there is risk of people pronouncing it learnin', but we thought that we would we'd go with the risk, and we like the idea of it being something simple like learn on. And so if you go to learnon.iu12.org, it will take you to the portal. You notice that we built the resources for 3 primary audiences: educators, district leaders, and parents and caregivers. When you roll over each of the 2 menus at the top, you'll see that the actual elements that are a part of each of those areas are located there. I'm going to start by looking at district leaders, and then I'll turn it over to Ben to take it for the educators and parents and caregivers as well. Before we get to that, though, I want to scroll down to show you the work that we've been doing so far. As I've shared, this work has actually started all the way back as of last week. We officially launched the site on Wednesday, March 18th. All of this has been done between that Monday, whatever that was, and the Thursday. We actually worked with superintendents to identify what the best dates would be for each of these elements. We did not want to put something out there when certain, your staff were being shared that they should not be working, or that they should not be providing education or instruction to students that then would make it seem like they should be. So we officially launched on last Thursday to all of the tech folks. So that is the ETAC group, the tech leaders, which are your tech directors, the TINET, which is your instructional coaches, who many times work with your staff or your educators, your technical people, which are your network managers groups. And then finally, we wrap the week up on Friday with the Curriculum Council as a whole, and then everybody that's in charge of online and blended learning. This week, we started by launching our leadership series. So we had 2 workshops yesterday that we ran. These were formal recorded workshops, which you'll be able to access in the recordings, which I'm going to show you in a second. We also have leadership hours that we've been hosting. We just actually ran, Ben and Nicole and I were just in our first leadership team meeting with a district specifically. We were just in our first one of the day just from here. So those are things you can sign up for. If you want to be able to get your team together, and your team may already be discussing this, and you very likely are an included member of that, Down here, you see that there is a leadership meeting scheduler. When you go to this, what we have is the ability for you, although today is completely booked, yesterday was completely booked, Wednesday, tomorrow, you have about 4 times left. Thursday, there's only about 4 times left. Friday, there's about 5 times left. So you can see here that if you go to this scheduler, it allows you to book with us one-on-one, where it is more about looking at the resources that you now have and being able to identify how you can make them mobilized within your own district. What you'll also notice is that if I scroll down and I go to March 30th, next Monday, this is where we are starting our entire professional learning series. We have 2 solid weeks of professional development all around the areas of instruction that we know your teacher learners are going to need in order to be able to best serve your student populations in this online medium. This goes from things that are from technical content area, but as you'll see, we also have tapped into our TAC trainers to be able to run sessions on how to support learners in ways that might be different, clearly are going to be different in this online world. So we actually just got this. What's going to allow us to do is finally activate this registration. We'll be taking care of all of the Act 48, and we'll make sure that that gets posted for you so that any staff that attend these sessions, as long as they hang out till the end, they'll just complete a very simple form, and then we'll upload Act 48 hours. It is Zoom webinars, not like here where everybody's sharing their webcam. We did that confidentially so that people didn't feel like they would have to be, displaying their names or their cameras to the world. So we're using Zoom webinars for this, and this URL right here in step 3 is the way that you get into the room. We have 3,000 seats in our Zoom webinar room. So we think that we'll be fine. We have 10,000 teachers across our entire footprint. So the likelihood of us reaching 30% was probably pretty unlikely, although it'll be a good problem to have. If somebody does miss a session, we are recording every one of them, making them fully accessible on YouTube, meaning that every one of them will be closed captioned as well for all of your educators who might miss that, okay? If there's anything that you might be missing, or any questions that you feel like we haven't yet addressed, we do have an FAQs down here at the bottom that you can fill in this form, and we will update the FAQs as questions are posed. Finally, because we know that this is an evolving resource every single day, we've added a recently updated or recently added content, and we tell you where those things have been added and direct you to them, as well as the time stamp of when that actually happened in reverse chronological order. We would hate for somebody to have gone to a page, thought that they checked off all the boxes from that particular site, and then, oops, now they go in and didn't realize we added more content. So that's the landing page. What I want to do now is dive into the leader side, because I have about 5 minutes left. I'm not going to go into every one of these steps. All I'm going to do is take you into one of them. But what you'll notice is if I go all the way to the district leaders, we have done this in a deliberate way. We have built out the site so that it is very step-based, chunked, and made in a way so that it is showing evidence that we are recognizing this fact right here. Let me go back. Sorry, I clicked on it a little too fast. This fact right here. We recognize that everybody is going to be doing the best that they can and making the best effort that they can. We also realize we're here in the home stretch of the school year. Sometimes putting in perspective, we were just talking with one of our districts, as I've just mentioned, and the last step that we talk about is considering and continually keeping in the forefront the social emotional impact that your students and your staff are having, you are having right now. And so keeping in perspective that you're gonna do the best you can, and realizing that what I love the last district just shared, so I'm going to steal it, is not letting perfect getting in the way of good. And I'm going to now use that, and Ben will probably shake his head, and because I do those sorts of things. But I think it's important to know that while this may not be the pathway that we would be following to get things online if we were doing a 3-year plan, it's going to be the best that we could put together. And so everything that we put in the step-based model has within it no more than 5 steps. So it's very sequential. And it's the things that we, as we developed our own plan at our IU, thought through of what we need to be able to be thinking about. And by no stretch do we have our plan completely ready. I think Lynn would agree. We're working on it, but we're not completely ready for launch yet. But we're following these steps. We're making sure that we have, and I'll just expand one of them. We're making sure that we have all of these kind of I's dotted, T's crossed. If you now have staff working at home, I know I just overheard some of the questions in the chat about confidentiality and privacy. Are you considering that as you look at the tool that you're using? And are you considering that as you're looking at the staff workplace environment? So we put, I say staff telework policy here, but really these are just some simple guidelines of if you're going to be working at home. I'm not going to go through them. You can click on them and go through them yourself. But if you're going to be working at home, what are some areas you want to make sure to consider to ensure that your employees have a safe working environment, have a confidential working environment, and are working in a way that you would expect, using technologies that you would expect them to be using. So that's why I go back. Right is going to be important. And I know many of you by this time have probably already started working on that. Knowing that you guys are the last job alike group that we were able to talk with, I feel like a lot has probably evolved since the first time that we released this. You'll also notice that there's some policy language here. You may not have a sample live streaming policy. What we've done is we've provided you with one, understanding that you may not have a board meeting between now and you're actual ready to deploy. So the recommendation that I would give is that this could be a way to be able to put out just some guidelines. Use some of the language that's in here instead of using it as a board policy that you don't have time to adopt. At the very least, make sure that if you're going to send communication home to families about what the expectations are about privacy and what the expectations are about what types of things you're going to even do remotely, if anything. Sometimes you might just have students doing a recording. You might have teachers that ask students to record some video. Well, there's things to consider about what they have in their backgrounds as they're doing their recordings and getting ready to drop into a Dropbox for your teachers to assess. So all of this is step one of the overall step of operationalizing. Every one of these other areas you can go through on your own. The only one that I would point out is as you come down through and as you get to your preparing phase, I would want to point out that besides the fact that, and Ben will talk a little bit about the Oreo online learning model as he gets into the educators, but I would be remiss if I didn't share that if you're really struggling with getting content online, we have worked with our online learning provider, which is Edgenuity and Odysseyware, to provide a really cost-effective way in the very short period of time here over the end of the school year to get access for every student, or even if it's just for your seniors or just for your students who are getting ready to prepare for an AP exam. A very cost-effective way to get them access to just the course content they need, where you're only paying a monthly fee of about $2 to $3 per student. And that's located, the resources for that are located right here in our Lincoln Cyber Cafe link. And again, that's under the preparation steps. So as I wrap up here at exactly about 15 minutes, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that all of these steps are exactly the same. So as you go through step 3, where the lesson templates are, step 4, where we're converting from face-to-face to digital or online, or as we're going to, and you start noticing the inclusive practices here, Ben's going to go into that a little bit more as well. And as we go down to the deployment, every single one of these is focused on very sequential step-based work. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn my screen sharing off and turn it back over to Ben. Now would be a good time. I saw people putting into the chat that I'm assuming that Ben and Nicole were we're perhaps going through if there were any areas that we needed to address. But Ben, I'm going to turn off screen sharing and turn it back over to you for going through the educator side.
Thanks, Jared. All right, so Jared's covered most of the site, but I wanted to highlight some of the pieces that we have under the educator site. And you can see in the drop-down that we have, when I go to for educators, we have continued the same strategy for listing out specific steps for people in terms of how they can implement their online instruction. So it begins with investigating best practices, and we have a best practices page. So this is the place that you'd want to send educators to begin with, is right to that best practices page. And then we just want them to think and consider all of their learners. And so that is where we're going to send people to the special ed, the EL page, and the gifted support pages. And we'll dive into those a little bit. The third step is to identify your warehouse. And when we talk about the warehouse, the most common warehouse you might see, like your schools may have an LMS. So you may be using Schoology or Canvas or Google Classroom or something along those lines. Is that with those types of tools, it's fine if your teachers are already familiar with that, but the ramping up, we see a lot of people saying, well, just use Google Classroom. One of the issues that can come up is when you think about using Google Classroom, there's actually a significant lift to getting it started, not only in terms of the teacher learning how to use all the tools, but also for the students just to get enrolled into the classroom. And so doing that face-to-face can be tough. So we would just urge you to consider the fact that doing it online with students may be difficult. And so we also point out that you could use like a Google Doc or some type of hyperdoc that would just have a list of links. And that if you do that with those types of links, that may just provide enough information for the students. If you're providing links and you have to consider possibly printing out these documents, so you're going to send this home, and you may have family situations where they have one computer and they have two adults who are trying to work from home and they're all working on it, that with those links, you may want to put a shortened link, like a bit.ly, in the text so that mom or dad can go online, they can print the document out and give it to the student, and at least in the printout version, they'll be able to see those links. And it also will save you time if you are trying to give printed materials to students as well. The next step in the process is to start the planning process. And we have developed these two documents based on the Oreo method. And if you want the background information for it, you can go back into the district leader site. But there's a daily template for what we call wayfinding. And this comes from Allison Yang, who we've adapted and included a UDL approach into the daily template. And then there's a weekly template as well. And the weekly template allows you to sequence the learning, giving 3 specific steps for each day in terms of what the student should do, and then 3 steps in terms of evidence that they're going to be providing for their learning. And in talking with some of our special ed supervisors, they like the idea of the chunking of material for students, trying to make it easy. And then the final piece is to look at the tools. And you'll notice that this comes last. And so we really encourage teachers not to be looking at the list of 1,000 tools that are out there. We don't find those tools to be particularly helpful, because for an educator to think about, okay, I have this stuff that is face-to-face, and now I'm going to make it be virtual. How do I make that shift? And in making that shift, we find that looking for the tool first is not necessarily the best way to approach that. So that's the overall plan for educators. And then we have several other places that they can go. So I'm going to highlight each of those quickly. For the webinar piece, we recorded the webinar. There's a YouTube channel that you can go out to. So for anybody that wants to see, what's the content that is available. And while Jared mentioned that the Act 48 piece is associated with the live webinars, we are also providing Act 48 credit for the recorded webinars. So you can see that we've already started some of those videos there. And so here will be the list of videos that are going to be as a part of the professional development series. And so, so when somebody watches one of those videos, if they complete the Act 48 form, they will receive credit. We're going to be doing a reporting out of all the Act 48 credit for any educators who participate. Under the Consider All Learners, you'll see that we have 3 sections. And these resources are being provided not only by our internal staff, but also by PAIU. And so as we get the best practices for special education, a lot of these were developed through statewide guidance and meetings that went on. And again, a step-by-step guidance here with a review of the state and federal requirements and links out to those direct sites that will provide the exact information and wording that came from them. PDE, when they met with us, they talked specifically about some definitions. And so we've copied and included those. And again, remember, these are for educators to be thinking about. And then we've asked them to consider the ideas in turn. We've also created a document that has specific special ed topics, and we're continuing to build this out. So if you're looking for information on assistive technology and specifically the move to online, we are creating pages that are going to help you support those particular pieces. And each of these are designed to provide information to help you with those specific questions that might come up, and they're focused on, in particular, how to move to online. So we know that you probably know about FBAs, but how do you move those to online education? So again, when you think about considering all learners, there's an expandable section to get to those 3. The other pieces include interventions and inclusive practices. And so you'll see we have, for each of the state mandated areas, each of those has a page. A lot of them are coming soon, so they're being built in the background, but they will be up to date very soon. Our assistive technology page is ready to go. And so our assistive technology TAC, Val Lill, has provided lots of content for us, planning questions to answer, resources for home, and she's included a number of videos that will be helpful when you think about those accessibility types of applications that are there. The other 2 pieces that exist are the free online tools. And again, when we think about free online tools, we wanted to highlight this. When you move from face-to-face, and Jared showed the chart, when you move from face-to-face to online, you should think about what are the things that I did with my students face-to-face, whether it was just direct instruction or it was student discussions or something like that. And then how do I move those types of things? So if I think about just direct instruction, here are some ways and tools that you can actually use for it. So rather than trying to give you this large list that you have to sort through, we're trying to think about how do I do group discussions and collaboration? And again, here are some ways that you might be able to do it. And you can dive deeper into those types of places for more information. And so that's the list that we have. If you're looking for those on those large lists and you want to go searching for tools, they're located at the bottom. And so online tools are one piece. Getting help for those tools, we would just highlight that Who Knew It, which is a great online resource. It provides instruction in small video bites. When I say small video bites, I'm talking about 1 to 2 minutes of video. And when it combines, it adds up to about 2 hours worth of content. So if you're looking for help on Zoom, they have an entire 2-hour course on Zoom, but it's chunked out so that you can pick and say, I just want to know how to use breakout rooms. And you can click on that and you can then start to use breakout rooms in Zoom with that targeted type of information. So, so that type of that access is available using the username here and the generic password, and then anybody in our IU footprint is able to make use of that. And then the final piece is the online content. So we break it up into tools and content, thinking about the two ways that we need to deliver instruction. And for the online content resources, these are broken out by subject area. And you can see we put the 4 cores at the top, and then there are areas for all the others that are listed at the bottom. And then these are long lists of sources of content. We did try and put some of our favorite ones at the top and then alphabetize those at the bottom. And we've also tried to indicate for you whether it's free always or free during the pandemic, or if it was a freemium model or a premium model. And so that you know when you choose a particular tool that you're able to say, you know what, this is going to cost money when we're done. And so I need to think about whether or not those people are going to be, or the teachers are going to be able to continue to use it in the long run. So, and then finally on the educators, you'll see that there's this glossary and acronyms, as you're probably very familiar with. We're trying to fill those things in for educators and people that come to the site that might want to know how to. Now, so Jared and I took most of the time to highlight district leaders and educators, but I don't want to forget about those parents and caregivers. And the parents and caregivers page provides that information for those that are going to be helping to instruct, from acquiring low-cost and no-cost internet to cleaning your device to tips on how to learn at home. So Vicki Davis, who goes by Cool Cat Teacher, does a great job of giving an overview of how to effectively learn in an online classroom. And so this is perfect for kids to take a look at and to be able, and families to look at and get started in terms of how they're going to learn at home. And then the other piece that I really wanted to point out is this Common Sense Media newsletter. This is a great little site. It's typically hidden content, but Common Sense has made it free for everybody, and it talks about tips and setting a schedule. And so it even has an example schedule that a parent could follow. So thinking about doing math in the morning and then some reading, physical education, connecting with friends. It really pays attention to the social emotional component of school that students might be missing out on as they're at home. And so providing them with some structure and some other resources that are there. And so that site is there for you to be able to make use of as well. So with that, I'm going to return back to the home page. And I know there have been things in the chat. Hopefully Jared and Nicole are taking care of those. I'm going to stop my share and see if there are any questions. Or Jared, did I miss anything?
No, thanks, Ben. Lynn, do you have anything that you would want to point out, or are there any SEEK members who have questions?
No, thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat or to ask now. I've been trying to put some of the helpful links that have been in the chat to our agenda, so you have them in the future. So, Ben and Jared, I thank you very much for sharing this information. There's a lot of resources on there.
Hey, thanks everybody. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Okay. So I'm going to reshare my agenda again. Okay, you should be seeing my screen at this point. I want to kind of go back up to this bullet here. So yesterday there was a meeting with PAIU and Matt Stem and Carol Clancy, and I just wanted to provide you with some of those wordings that they used to describe how we provide education during this time. We talked about the guidance, and that is in the learn on iu12.org site, which Jared and Ben just went through. This point here, in the current situation, they have stated that the focus is on offering appropriate and reasonable instruction, and the risk of doing nothing is greater than trying something. And I know in the world of special ed, we want to make sure that we meet the needs of students in the and provide accommodations that's appropriate. Given the fact that now all students are at home, that may look a bit different and not be necessarily what we want it to be, but we have to go ahead and put good faith efforts to try something to provide them with some type of instruction. And that will include the utilization of some parents at home to help their students to be engaged or to complete hand-over-hand activities as needed. We just have to present something and try and offer planned instruction or some type of review instruction. Just to let you know here that we are finding it a bit difficult at our time as we support all the special education students in our programs across the 3 counties, knowing that that includes students in our MDS programs in our centers, our students in our emotional support and TES programs, life skill support, those in the community as well, for whom online instruction may not be the best option. So the supervisors have been awesome in terms of being able to provide really some brainstorming and creativity to what is going on at this point to be able to provide some information. We had originally thought, hey, maybe we can do some drive-throughs and drop-offs so that we can copy and print materials. However, given the governor's urgency for social distancing and the closure of all non-life sustaining businesses, that this really limits our possibilities to bring people in to our buildings. We want to definitely ensure the safety of our staff during this time. So at this point, our buildings are closed. So we will continue to reevaluate that and reevaluate how we can certainly get information to students as time goes on within this event. I'll pause there for a moment. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Oh, I did. So let me check the chat room here. Yes, I will certainly put the FBE link into the agenda. That's there. What communication? What communication has been sent to parents in LIU classrooms? So there have been 3 letters sent home to parents, one on March 6th, one on March 13th, and one on March 20th. The recent one I know for sure was shared with all of SEEK members when it was going out to parents regarding the fact that the school is still closed, that the teachers will be utilizing this week, the week of the 23rd through the 27th, to connect with them and just to touch base, see how things were going, and that they were going to utilize time to prepare online instruction opportunities. It is our, the way that we're working is that all LIU teachers will be up and ready to offer some type of distance instruction or remote instruction starting March 30th. That said, I know not all districts are starting March 30th, so I ask that you communicate with me or the supervisors of when you are starting so that we can follow what the district is doing. We certainly do not want to be, if we host a class, if we have a classroom in one of your districts, that if you start sometime after March 30th, we want to make sure that we're starting at the same time that you are starting. So please communicate when you are starting. your remote instruction to either me and or the supervisors, and we will make sure that our teachers are engaged in that same timeline. That said, about parent communication, certainly, obviously, with the extension of the school closure, there will be another parent letter going out today or tomorrow to them, indicating that school has been closed for additional extended weeks, and that we will continue to engage in communicating with students and offering, a remote instruction as well. Any other questions or comments at this time?
Lynn, this is Ginger Thompson from Greencastle.
Hi, Ginger.
Hey, I'm sorry, I just got kicked off the webinar just for a second, but so if you answered this question, I apologize. You were talking about center-based classrooms and, just the difficulty with reaching those kiddos, which I think we all totally agree with. So when we're thinking about starting the process of issuing NORAPs to families and things like that, what kind of communication will be going to those families and students specifically regarding continuity of education?
So, Ginger, that's a good question. And those are, as this is new times for all, and I just ask that we work collaboratively together to be able to have that same communication with parents and what you're going to do. So if you're going to offer NORAPs, then we want to make sure that the students that we educate from your district, we're offering NORAPs as well. So that, again, would be a communication with the program supervisors to ensure that we are following what you are following. There's a question in the chat. Is it possible for directors to get a copy of the letters that were sent out to parents of students? Yes, certainly will. I'll make sure I'll send all 3 of them out, including the one that gets sent out in the next day or so. Any other questions at this time? Okay. Just to reiterate again that the common language definition of terms I have included in the agenda, excuse me, as well, that came from Matt Stem yesterday. And he also did state that a district may choose to plan instruction for certain grade levels and not for others, all depending on what, again, resources that you have in your district, as well as your priorities of focus and what you want to offer. So what he's saying is what you offer for one grade level, you don't necessarily have to offer for all. So this is all new to everybody. It's all, and things are going to be different across districts, and just putting those good faith efforts forth. He also did say to prioritize. So for instance, if you're focusing on seniors, focus on those seniors who are getting ready to graduate, making sure that they get and have what they need in order to do so. Focusing on those students in special education who may have been seeing or been meeting progress or been achieving some success and some progress prior to this event. So maybe focusing on how we can continue that as best possible to lessen any chances for less progress to be stunted or to be made during this time. That's about all I had at this point in time. I will continue to update you. I will send those letters out. Are there anything else, special education supervisors, that I may have missed or you want to share? Okay, is there anything for the good of the order that anybody would like to share? Okay, well, thank you. And just so you know, I'm not trying to be rude, but I have not pictured myself today, and not because that, I mean, I'm dressed and everything, but when I put my video on, my internet does some funky things. So that's why I hadn't had it on this whole time. So.
Just for the good of the order too, Lynn, I just want to thank all of you for what you're doing. As a father of 3 public school kids, I really appreciate everything everyone's doing. And I don't just say that because I practice school law. My wife's a teacher. I see her pulling her hair out here. We're all in close confines in a tiny little house. So thank you for what you're doing, sincerely.
Thank you all. Now the question was asked, can we save the chat to your computer? If you want the whole chat, I can certainly do that. But I did include some of the links there, and I will certainly make sure that the links are included, but I can see about at least attaching or making another document of the entire chat, so you have that as well, and as well as the recording once it renders. Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you very much. Please feel free to engage us in brainstorming as needed. And please reach out to us, and we want to work with you to make sure that the students that we are educating from your districts, that we're on the same page in doing so, and we're offering the best we can during these times. So be well, everybody, and thank you for joining. Special education supervisors, if you want to stay on, we'll give everyone a couple moments to leave, and I will get this chat copied. Oh, thank you. I was still recording, so let me stop the recording.